Chapter 20, Lesson 1 deals with tobacco. Now, tobacco is a very interesting topic because most people know somebody in their life who uses some form of tobacco, whether that's cigarettes, chewing tobacco, pipes, cigars, you name it. Most people are familiar with the products. We also know that tobacco is under a lot of scrutiny over the last 20 years or more because of the health effects that go along with the use of all these products. So let's talk about the health risks of tobacco use. In advertisements where tobacco products are being used, we typically see healthy, attractive people sending a message that tobacco has no health consequences. We know that's simply not the case. Long-term tobacco use can cause a host of different problems, of which we're going to talk about later in this lesson and in other lessons throughout this chapter. Medical studies show tobacco is the leading cause of most preventable deaths and disability in the United States. You think about it. Tobacco use is a choice. It's a decision a person makes. We don't always know when we're going to have heart problems. We don't know when cancer is always going to affect different people, although there are different behaviors that can cut down the risk of those. Sometimes they happen to even healthy people. Tobacco use is a choice, and it's something that can be prevented along with all the illnesses that come along with it. It's linked to lung disease, cancers, and heart diseases. 90% of adult smokers began the habit as teenagers, typically under the legal age of 18 to be buying and purchasing tobacco products. And most teens think they can quit whenever they want to. The reality is quitting is very difficult. Ask anybody who is a smoker, and I'll bet money that they've tried to quit at some point in their life and have struggled to reduce the amount of tobacco use that they do on a daily basis. Looking at different types of ads that are out there, certainly with tobacco, we don't see commercials. You might see them in magazines. You might see a billboard here or there, but there are different laws that limit the amount of advertising that smoking companies or tobacco companies can do. Looking at the woman here on the left, we see a beautiful thin woman smoking a cigarette. Down the bottom, we see this kind of rugged, tough guy, possibly a cowboy type persona who's smoking. And then over the right, we have Joe Camel that would kind of stereotype a cool guy with a cool car. In fact, Joe Camel is somebody that is an advertising campaign that came under a lot of scrutiny in the 80s and 90s because there were some studies that were done that proved almost as many kids recognized Joe Camel as they did recognize Mickey Mouse. And in 1997, the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company voluntarily took Joe Camel off all their advertisements. But he's still out there and can be seen from time to time in old ads and certainly on the internet. We can't talk about tobacco products without talking about nicotine. Nicotine is the addictive chemical or drug that gets people to crave having a cigarette or whatever their tobacco choice is over and over again and continues their use. An addictive drug is a substance that causes physiological or psychological dependence. Either the body or the mind is craving the need or the desire for the drug, in this particular case nicotine, which is the addictive drug found in tobacco leaves. And tobacco is a plant that grows and is legal to be grown in the United States and other countries. It's not like these plants, like the coca plant that we get cocaine from, or some of these other ones where cultivation or having the seeds and things like that is regulated and against the law. Nicotine is a stimulant. It's a drug that increases the action of the central nervous system, the heart, and other organs. Usually raises blood pressure and increases your heart rate. So it's going to feel like a little burst of energy, but really what it is, it's very similar to caffeine, where the person is going to be a little bit more alert and awake. Now, nicotine in by itself is not a real bad thing. Again, very similar to caffeine, but there are other poisonous substances in tobacco smoke. We call these carcinogens, or at least the ones that cause cancer, and there's a lot of them. Another chemical that is in tobacco smoke as a result of breathing it in is tar, which is a thick, sticky, dark fluid produced when tobacco burns. Almost think of it as like a motor oil, kind of a thick, dark fluid that builds up over time of breathing in heavy amounts of smoke. can damage respiratory system by paralyzing and destroying cilia. I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. Cilia is a tiny hair-like structures that line the upper airways and protect the body against infection. Imagine all your bronchial tubes and your trachea being lined with tiny microscopic hairs that catch the debris and dust and dirt and things that we breathe in on a daily basis, can kind of help collect it and cause you to cough, snort, sneeze to get rid of it so it doesn't get into your lungs. And again, if it does, it damages lung tissue, reducing lung function. Smokers are susceptible to diseases such as bronchitis, pneumonia, emphysema, heart disease, and certainly cancer. 87% of cancer deaths result from smoking. Not always just lung cancer, but certainly can lead to other ones. And that's a pretty high number, again, related to what we would call a preventable cause of death, a choice a person makes, and that is using tobacco products. On the left here, we see what would be a cutaway section of somebody's trachea or bronchial tubes where all these tiny little hair-like cilia line the inside of it. And again, brush dirt away, collect the dirt and debris, cause you to sneeze, cough, trying to get rid of that stuff. And imagine just covering that with a tar-like solution or something that would resemble motor oil, and of course that cilia wouldn't be able to do their job. I often get asked in class, when we use the word tar, are we talking about tar that's used on our driveway, on the roads? And the answer really is, yeah, it's pretty close to that. I'm going to show you a video here that really resembles what the end product looks like after smoking dozens, hundreds of cigarettes, and the collection of the tar involved. I'm going to use 20 packs of cigarettes, 20 cigarettes per pack for a total of 400. Now they created this device, don't ask me how, that's going to pull the smoke from each cigarette into the machine and collect the tar and chemicals from each one. Tenth one. After an hour, they've done 60 cigarettes. This is the 150th cigarette. Watch the watercolor inside the bottle as it collects the tar from each cigarette. 3 hours and 20 minutes, they've done 380. The water turns black, it's absorbing all that tar. Four hundredth. Now they're going to boil it. Anybody want a cup of coffee? Can you imagine what that would smell like? The water's vaporizing, basically evaporating. The tar is going to remain. Anybody want a piece of burnt steak? Extremely fatal poison. Very sticky and bitter. Now, it's not a perfect simulation because, as we know, when people take a puff in on a cigarette or pipe or cigar, they're going to exhale as well. And they're going to get rid of a bunch of the smoke. And it's not going to all stay in their lungs. This particular simulation, they collect every ounce of all the smoke that comes through. The other thing is, not everybody's going to smoke the cigarette all the way down to the end as they did. So, but this is still, if this were a 1 pack a day, we're talking about this is 20 days. Now imagine 20 years of somebody smoking a pack a day. It would be quite a bigger impact. Another poisonous substance in tobacco smoke is carbon monoxide. It's a colorless, odorless, and poisonous gas. It's absorbed more easily than oxygen, and oftentimes will replace oxygen in the bloodstream and it'd be absorbed by the body as opposed to the amount of oxygen that we should have. Not that it's going to completely cut off your oxygen supply, but enough to prevent you from getting the oxygen that you, the level that you need. And carbon monoxide is going to deprive the tissues and cells of that oxygen if we're not getting enough. A lot of you may have a carbon monoxide detector in your house because your furnace or your gas stove, as a byproduct of burning natural gas to create heat, will create carbon monoxide. But those devices do a pretty good job of venting out the carbon monoxide, so it's never a problem. But should that machine fail, the carbon monoxide can build up in your house. And again, it's colorless, odorless. You don't know it's there, and people can breathe that in. They can pass out and die. There have been stories of people who have been hurt or killed in their own home because they didn't know that there was a toxic level of carbon monoxide building up. There's a story in the news somewhere in Minnesota a few years ago where a family of 4, husband, wife, and 2 children, were found dead in their house, in their beds, because the carbon monoxide had built up over the night and they had no idea. And that's a scary situation. So the solution is to have a cheap $10, $20 carbon monoxide detector in your house, just like a smoke detector that'll alarm you if the levels get too high. We can't talk about tobacco without talking about pipes and cigars. Cigars contain significantly more nicotine and produce more tar and carbon monoxide than cigarettes. Obviously, if you compare the size of a cigar to a cigarette, it's usually significantly bigger. One cigar can contain as much nicotine as 20 cigarettes. Pipe and cigar smokers have increased risk of cancer in the lips, mouth, throat, larynx, lungs, and esophagus. Mostly because pipe and cigar smokers don't habitually or routinely inhale the smoke all the way into their lungs. They typically inhale it into the back of their throat, into their mouth, and then exhale or blow it out when they're ready. It's much too harsh a smoke to bring all the way into your lungs. Now, naturally, someone's going to get in there and it can cause problems, but the problems are going to be more related to around the mouth, throat, and esophagus. Other big form of tobacco use is smokeless tobacco. Probably heard the word chew or spit tobacco. It's typically sniffed through the nose, held in the mouth, or chewed. Some cultures do sniff it through their nose a little bit, especially flavored tobaccos. It's not a safe alternative to smoking. Now, it's not going to affect your lungs as much as anything that involves a smoke, but there's a high risk involved, like the pipes and tobaccos, to mouth, throat, tongue, cheek, different parts of your upper respiratory tract and mouth from chewing it in your mouth. Smokeless tobacco are absorbed into the levels up to 3 times the amount of a single cigarette, so they are high in nicotine use. Leukoplakia is a thickened white, leathery looking spots on the inside of the mouth that can develop into oral cancer. You know, for those of you who've ever burned your tongue, you get kind of a white little callus for a couple days. Imagine that on a little bit bigger scale on your tongue or inside your cheek. It kind of gets tough. That is a precursor to cancer and certainly a big concern for people who use smokeless tobacco. Cancers from smokeless tobacco, including mouth, throat, larynx, esophagus, stomach, and pancreas, all are incredibly dangerous and can be the result of using chewing tobacco. You know, someone who does 8 to 10 plugs a day would be the equivalent to 2 packs of cigarettes in a day, and we certainly know there are people out there who will do that. Some pictures related to chewing tobacco. Chewing tobacco can come kind of in a rough cut like this, and some are put in plugs like snus, but we see more of a fine cut like this that can be called snuff, and people tuck that between their cheek and jaw, and what we see as a result, as a precursor to cancer, is that leukoplakia again. Here we see kind of this white leathery patch, almost looks like the dead skin from a burn, which probably some people could write it off as, but doesn't go away in a couple days. And this would be between the gum line and the cheek. Some of the harmful effects of tobacco use, we have short-term effects. You know, your brain chemistry is going to change. That addiction resulting from the nicotine in the tobacco causes the body to crave more of the drug. User may experience withdrawal symptoms such as headaches, nervousness, trembling as soon as 30 minutes after tobacco use. Now that's somebody who's, been using it for a while, not just 1 or 2 cigarettes, but certainly we know that the withdrawal can come along with any addiction. We'll see respiration and heart rate increase. And now if somebody already is at risk for a heart disease, heart attack, certainly that puts them at even an increased risk of something traumatic happening. Your taste buds are dulled and your appetite is reduced. If you're like me, I don't want to have my food taste any less than it already does. I think smoking cigarettes would be a bad idea just for that, and certainly can lead to users having bad breath, yellow teeth, smelly hair, skin, and clothes. If you've ever been around a smoker, you're probably familiar with at least some of those consequences of smoking. Some of the more long-term harmful effects of tobacco use include diseases of the lungs, like chronic bronchitis. Now, chronic means long-term, doesn't mean, there are people who get bronchitis where it can last a week or a few days. You get medicine, you go to the doctor, and you typically feel better. But chronic is going to be long-term. A lot of times we associate that with smoker's cough. It occurs when cilia in the bronchi become damaged, so they are useless, leads to a buildup of tar in the lungs, causing more and more chronic coughing, trying to get the excessive mucus out of the lungs. Emphysema is a disease that destroys tiny air sacs in the lungs called alveoli. A person with emphysema uses up to 80% of his or her energy just to breathe. Imagine running a mile, being winded, being out of shape, and now imagine somebody who's feeling like that fairly regularly just because their lungs can't handle breathing on a day-to-day basis. Lung cancer, 90% of lung cancer deaths are caused by smoking. There are certainly other things that can cause lung cancer, but 90% due to smoking. Coronary heart disease and stroke. Nicotine can constrict blood vessels, cutting down blood flow to limbs. Certainly if that happens in the brain, that's going to be a stroke. Arterial sclerosis is hardening the arteries where plaque builds up. That can lead to heart attack. And we know that people can have a weakened immune system long term, which makes the body more vulnerable to illness and sickness. Here's a little look at both chronic bronchitis and emphysema. Chronic bronchitis, we should have nice open pathways in our bronchial tubes, and when we have chronic bronchitis, they become swollen and inflamed, and you can see here there's some mucus in there, which makes breathing much more difficult. We end up coughing quite a bit to try and expel this mucus. Emphysema, in our lungs, we have what are called alveoli. They look like little bunches of grapes, and they're the ones that fill up with air and make our lungs expand like a balloon. Our lungs are not one big balloon. Emphysema will kind of cause these to get weakened, they collapse, they break, and they no longer are able to bring in air. And if that happens throughout the lungs, your lung capacity and ability to breathe is severely affected. Some other consequences of tobacco use, if we look at society, tobacco-related illnesses cost the U.S. about $160 billion each year. People are going to the doctor. People are, leaving work. People are having higher insurance costs. Things that may not seem like it directly affects us, but our insurance costs go up. Our medical bills go up to cover these other people who are, again, being hurt or being sick by a choice they're making by choosing to smoke. Cost to the individual, one pack a day spends about $3,500 a year. That in Minnesota has gone up due to new taxes. So you imagine if you would be given $3,500 extra a year, what you could do with that. If someone was a smoker, to be able to get that money back, that's a big amount of money. That's a pretty good vacation, or that's a car payment every month that would get you a pretty nice vehicle. Legal consequences, we know people under the age of 18, it's illegal to buy in this country. And on school grounds, it can lead to suspension or expulsion depending on the use and the how many times a person has maybe been caught with it. So young people are getting in trouble for it because it is illegal under the age of 18.